towards the end of my tour, it was October, I was sent out early in the morning, solo, and my call sign that day was Mike 14. Now, Mike was a call sign FACs would use when they were doing certain missions in support of SOG. Normally I was Covey 582, but that morning I was Mike 14. A monsoon type front had gone through and the weather was real bad. Low ceilings, rain, that kind of thing. The runway was wet. I took off in the dark. I don't remember what time it was, 5:30 in the morning or something like that. And I was going to stay out there until about probably 8-ish and then be relieved by, as I later learned, Lieutenant Glenn Wright, who was a 2-tour forward air controller. Great guy, very aggressive, hard charger, gallant. And with him was Plastic Man. John seemed to have been everywhere. He did 3 tours over there. Amazing courage. He's called the ultimate sniper nowadays. He's got a website even about that. Not trying to put in a plug for you, John. But I was out there. I took off in the bad weather. I was in and out of layers of clouds and rain, and I knew the area fairly well. It was out on the western side of the Idrang Valley, near the Cambodian border. Unbeknownst to me at the time, a HALO team, which stands for High Altitude Low Opening, team had jumped out of C-130s the night before in the middle of the night, and 4 guys had parachuted into the jungle near the Cambodian border to run a SOG mission, right? And my job was to kind of be the babysitter until Glenn and Plastic Man showed up at the end of my, fuel duration at about 8 or so. So I would check it on the radio. Turns out, I believe it was the 1-3. The team leader was the 1-0, then they had a 1-1, a 1-2, and a 1-3, so that was the 4 of them. I didn't realize at the time, but the 1-3 had the radio, I think. Anyway, I would make contact with him, and he would whisper that everything was okay. And that was that. And so after about 2.5 hours of this, my fuel was, I was about 30 minutes away from bingo fuel, which meant fuel that you had to go back with, right? And I was just boring holes in the sky, in and out of the clouds and rain, and kind of doing my thing. And the radio, the Fox Mike radio came alive. Mike, I'm under fire. I need TAC air. I need tactical air. And you could hear the gunfire in the background as he's talking to me. He's not whispering anymore, right? No point of whispering at that point. And I was right over an undercast. I couldn't see the ground where I was. And what I decided to do, I knew these guys, they treated me like I was one of them. I'm just an Air Force pilot, right? But they treated me like I was one of their unit, which is, a nice honor. And I would do anything for them. So what happened was I got on the radio, and I forgot what his call sign was. It was, it was some kind of code name, like, I don't know, Blue 7 or something like that. I said, Blue 7, or, where are you? Where are you? I can't work TAC air. I said, fighters can't see the ground. They can't see me. I can't see them. TAC air won't work. And I said, I'll tell you what, can you hear my engines? And he said, yeah, I can hear your engine. I said, so on a compass, where's my sound? And he said, you're to my west. I said, okay, I'm coming east. Tell me when it sounds like I'm overhead. So I turned and went east as fast as I could, as fast as the O2 would fly, because I had cruise settings up until then. I said, tell me when you hear my sound overhead. So he said, he came on the radio a few minutes later and said, you sound like you're overhead. You sound like you're overhead. And he's shooting. You can hear the guns going off. I said, okay, I'm coming down. I'm going to try to find you. And so I started to go down. I thought, okay, this is interesting. But I'm not going to, what am I going to do? I'm not going to leave these guys, right? Just about every FAC I know would have done the same thing. So I started to circle and weave and go down. I'm trying to look for holes in the clouds, and I'd see the ground occasionally here and there. I broke out of the weather kind of low. Plastic Man said that day that we were all down at about 200 or 300 feet. The ceiling was that low. It was pretty solid undercast all the way, just about all the way back to Pleiku. And I was in a hard left bank, at least 45 degrees of bank. By then, you know, the O2 felt like a second skin to me, right? And as I broke out of the clouds, pretty close to the ground, and I was right over a bomb crater. And in the middle of the bomb crater was an orange panel. And I knew that had to be him. And I'm thinking, this is a miracle. And so I got on the radio and I said, you know, Blue 7, are you in a bomb crater with an orange panel? And he goes, yeah, that's me, that's me. And he says, give me some fighters. I need TAC Air. I said, I'm all you got, but I'm going to give you what I got. And I had those 14 smoke rockets, which are not really offensive weapons, but the NVA didn't like them because they'd blow up and throw a little bit of shrapnel out, and the white phosphorus, if it got on them, it would burn, right? So it was an effective weapon. And so I said, okay, where is the enemy? And he said, they're all around the bomb crater. Just hit anywhere around the bomb crater. I said, okay, keep your head down. Here I come. And of course, I'm on the radio trying to get word back to Glenn and those other guys, because they were, I think, on the way back right about then, and said, we got a prairie fire. You know, we need choppers out here. And I told them where to come approximately off grid coordinates. And I said, I'm trying to keep their heads down till you can get them out here. And then Glenn and John, Plastic Man, had gone back to Pleiku to get an M16 to come out and shoot out the window, if necessary. So I fired my rockets. I'd shoot one rocket, maybe two. I'd go through without shooting a rocket sometime just to buy some time. And I stayed over them down low, and you know, the enemies down there with small arms. There's a lot of small arms flying around. I remember rolling in on the target to fire my first rocket to the north side of the bomb crater. And I reached up to arm the master arm switch. And as I started to roll in, I distinctly remember thinking, this is wild. And so after about 4 or 5 rockets, I pulled off a little ways and kept him in sight, of course. But I said, how am I doing? And he said, you're doing great, keep it coming, his exact words. So I came back and I shot the rest of my rockets and stayed in the area like I was going to, you know, control fighters somewhere. And in the meantime, those guys are coming out. I'm running low on fuel. And I had gone past bingo fuel because I wasn't going to leave. I don't know too many FACs who would have left. You know, you just do what you got to do. Or you would have stayed. Anybody would have stayed, you know. I finally got to the point where I looked at my fuel and said, I got enough to get back. That's about it. And I'd been there 10 months, so I got a pretty good feel for that. I told him I got a RTB, or I'm going to be down there with you. He said, thanks, Mike. And in the meantime, Glenn and John were getting real close to kind of take the handoff, you know. So I flew back, but to get back, I stayed down low, and I kind of was going northeast up the Idrang River Valley at a couple hundred feet. Glenn and John, Plastic Man, were coming the opposite southwest direction, and we passed each other under the clouds. And I remember I looked over at him and he looked at me, and we did wing rock as we went by. And I didn't know who the other FAC was until the first FAC reunion in the year 2000. And I was standing with Glenn Wright having a beer, and we were talking about our most memorable mission. And I said this, and he said that, and he said that, and I said this. And then next thing you know, we looked at each other and went, you were the other guy? No kidding. True story, right? I flew back to Pleiku, and I landed. One tank looked like it was on empty. The other one was pretty dang close. And I was just thinking, okay, I'm pretty sure I got enough fuel to get back. And so I came in and shot the approach and landed and came in and shut down. And the maintenance guy came to me a little bit later and said, Lieutenant, I don't know if you realize, but you had one tank empty and the other one just kind of on fumes. I said, well, okay. I wasn't trying to do that. When warriors are out in battle, whether they're soldiers or airmen or sailors or whatever, they don't try to do something that's gallant. They just get in a situation where the exigencies of the situation require that they react. And 99% of the time, they react. Just like I did that day, and Glenn did, and John Plaster did, and all the other FACs in my squadron did on numerous occasions. But as a result of that, I received the Silver Star, and very humbling. And we didn't lose anybody on the team that day, so a happy ending to the story.
Were you worried at all if those white phosphorus rockets would spill into that crater?
Well, no. I felt I was a pretty good shot with a rocket by then. As a matter of fact, we had a gun sight in the O2, and about 2/3 of the way through my tour, I quit using it because you could use old Kentucky windage. And I was also down low enough that, I mean, what I was looking at, that crater was pretty good sized from my vantage point. If I wanted to put a rocket in on any corner of that, or any part of the circumference of that crater, I felt I could do it. Other FACs could hit stuff like that too. I mean, you got good at shooting those rockets after a while. And so I just left the gun sight off, and I was too low for that anyway, and said, okay, time is of the essence here. I'm not going to sit there and set my gun sight and set my mills and go pull off and set my gun sight while he's down there, trying to stay in one piece. I just said, here I come, keep your head down. So, the next day, I had another SOG prairie fire mission out of Khartoum. So I got in my airplane, flew up to Khartoum, got in the Jeep, unstrapped my .45, the routine. I described it before, drove into town and got there. And before we briefed, I got in their chow line because I needed some breakfast. And I was standing in the chow line, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder. And I turned around. It was a gentleman named Mark Gentry, and I learned his name later in my life. But he was a young, handsome, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Green Beret sergeant. I was 24. He was probably 20, so I was the old man, right? Okay. But he said to me, Lieutenant, were you Lieutenant, were you Mike 14 yesterday? And I frankly didn't think anything other than to say, yeah, that was me. He sticks his hand out to shake my hand. Of course, I react reflexively to shake his hand. And he says, I was in the bomb crater. Thanks for saving my life. I shook his hand, and did I say something magnanimous or anything? No, I just went, oh, sure, no problem. Those guys, the gallantry that they exhibited day in and day out, was just, you were in the presence of heroes. So as an Air Force guy, you're welcome. Sure, glad to help you out, man.